Welcome back to the deep dive. If you're listening to this, I want you to take a second and just visualize where we are today. We're transporting ourselves to New Delhi. It's February 2026. The winter fog is just lifting. The union budget has just been presented, and we are stepping right onto the floor of the Lok Sabha.
And if you think you know what a parliament session sounds like, you might need to adjust your volume settings because the atmosphere in the House right now, electric, is, well, it's too polite a word. It is volatile, it's polarized, and it's incredibly loud.
It really feels like we're watching a split-screen reality, a glitch in the matrix almost.
Yeah.
On one side, you have the government. They are projecting this supreme, unshakable confidence. They're talking about 2047. They're talking about a Viksit Bharat, a fully developed India. They have spreadsheets. They have these massive infrastructure targets. And they have a vision of India as a digital superpower that rivals, anyone in the West or the East.
That's one screen. But if you just pan your camera over to the other side of the room, to the opposition benches, it is a completely different movie playing. They are louder and more energized than we have seen in perhaps a decade. And they aren't looking at 2047. They're looking at right now. And what they're saying is that the country is in an undeclared emergency. They say the government is blind to the streets, blind to the youth, and blind to the fact that the literal infrastructure, the roofs and the bridges, is crumbling.
And that is the friction we are unpacking today. We're calling this deep dive the clash of two Indias. Because really, depending on who is holding the microphone, you're living in two completely different countries. Our mission today is to cut through the noise of the shouting matches. And believe me, there is a lot of shouting to find the signal. We've pulled a massive stack of sources for this one. Official Lok Sabha debates from July 2024 all the way to this week in 2026, the latest budget reports from the Economic Times, political analysis from Swaraj and the Pioneer, and of course, ground reports on the ideological warfare between Rahul Gandhi and Prime Minister Modi.
And we really need to go deep because the surface-level headlines just don't explain the tension. We have to understand the digital blueprint the government is selling and then weigh it against the demolition, warnings the opposition is, well, screaming. Because somewhere between the glossy brochures of the future and the angry protests of the present, that's where the actual state of the nation lies.
So let's start with the money. The government just dropped the union budget for 2026-27. In any country, the budget is a statement of intent. It tells you what the government cares about. So looking at the numbers, what's the obsession this year?
The obsession is a 5-letter word, CapEx, capital expenditure.
Okay, for the listeners who might not be economists, let's break that down. Why is CAPEX the magic word? Why not just say spending?
That's a great question. So there are two ways a government can spend money. You have revenue expenditure, and that's like paying the electricity bill or paying salaries. It keeps the lights on, but it doesn't really build anything new. Capital expenditure, or CapEx, is spending money to create assets, building a road, a bridge, a port, a power plant. The theory is that this has a multiplier effect.
Meaning, if you spend 1 rupee building a road, it generates, 3 rupees of economic activity because trucks can move faster, people get jobs building it, that sort of thing.
Precisely, or, well, that's the theory. And the government is betting the house on this. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has set a record target of 12.2 lakh crore for CAPEX.
12.2 lakh crore. That number is just so big it becomes abstract. To put that in perspective, that's a massive jump even from the previous year, which was already a record at 11.2 lakh crore.
It is a colossal amount of money. And what it signals is that the government believes the only way to become the third largest economy, which is their stated goal, is to build their way there. They're arguing that if you create the skeleton of a superpower, the transit, the logistics, the power grids, the muscle and flesh of the economy will just grow naturally around it.
And they aren't just throwing these numbers into a void. When you read the debates, the ruling party MPs, people like Bansuri Swaraj or Anurag Thakur, they're walking into Parliament with a list of achievements that reads like an engineering catalog.
Oh, absolutely. They're using these projects as trophies. Take the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, the village road scheme. They claim to have built 3.8 lakh kilometers of village roads. I mean, that connects rural India to the market in a way that just wasn't possible 20 years ago. They claim the speed of national highway construction has literally doubled.
And it's not just asphalt. It's the railways. 25,000 kilometers of new rail tracks. I'm trying to visualize that. That is more than half the circumference of the Earth.
It's a logistical overhaul. But what's interesting is how they use prestige projects to build a national narrative. It's not just about moving trains. It's about pride. Take the Chenab River Bridge.
The one in Jammu and Kashmir. The really high
The
one.
very same. It's the world's highest railway bridge. It towers over the riverbed at a height that's actually higher than the Eiffel Tower. Or take the Mumbai Trans-Harbor Link, or the underwater metro in Kolkata. When the government highlights these, they aren't just saying, we improved commute times. They're saying, look at what Indian engineering can do. We are Viksit Bharat. We are a developed nation in the making.
It's branding. It's the shining India narrative reloaded for the 2020s. But the concrete is only half the story, right? If you read the Economic Times reports, there's a huge push for the invisible infrastructure too, the digital side.
Right. This is the second pillar of their argument, digital India. And honestly, the numbers here are staggering, even for skeptics. They proudly cite that 46% of global digital transactions happen in India.
Wait, say that again? Nearly half of the world's digital payments? That seems incredibly high.
It is, but it's driven by the UPI system and just the sheer population scale. They credit the JAM Trinity,
What's JAM again?
Yanthan, which is bank accounts for everyone, Ahar, the biometric identity system, and mobile connectivity. They see this as the engine that formalizes the economy. But in this 2026 budget, they're trying to level up. It's not just about using apps anymore. They want to own the hardware.
This is the semiconductor push, right? I saw mention of a new plant in Assam.
Yes, a year-s 27,000 crore investment for a semiconductor plant in Assam. Now, think about the geopolitics of that for a second. Placing a high-tech chip manufacturing hub in the Northeast, it's a strategic statement. It ties directly into Atmanirbhar, the self-reliance. The government's argument is, we cannot depend on China or Taiwan for the brains of our computers, our phones, our cars. We need to build them here.
So they're building the roads and they're building the chips, and they're also claiming to build the human capital. There's this term digital university floating around. What's that about?
That's their attempt to sort of democratize higher education, bring it online at scale. But they also point to the brick-and-mortar institutions. They've established 7 new ITs, 7 IMs, 15 AIMs. The narrative is that they are creating the elite workforce needed to run this new high-tech India.
There's one more stat from the government side that really caught my eye. Defense. For decades, India was known as the world's biggest importer of arms. We bought everything from Russia, France, the US. But the notes say defense exports are hitting IN's 21,000 crore.
That is an 18-fold increase, according to their data. It's a massive pivot. They're exporting missiles like the BrahMos to the Philippines and other nations. So when the government MPs stand up in the Lok Sabha, they have this whole package. They say, look at the data. We are secure, we are building, we are digital, and we are growing. The mandate is for stability.
Stability, that's the key word. They're basically telling the voters, don't rock the boat. The boat is turning into a luxury liner. Just give us time.
And they dismiss the opposition's noise as a fake narrative. They argue that the opposition is just spreading fear because they don't have a blueprint of their own. They say the opposition is hiding behind the Constitution because they can't fight on the economy.
Okay, so that is the view from the Treasury benches. It's sunny, it's steel, it's silicon. But now, let's swivel our chairs. Let's look at the opposition. Because if you listen to Rahul Gandhi or Akhilesh Yadav, they aren't seeing a luxury liner. They're seeing the Titanic after it hit the iceberg.
It's a complete inversion of reality. It's staggering. Rahul Gandhi, who has now been the leader of opposition for about a year, calls this budget blind.
Blind is a very specific word choice. It implies the government isn't just making mistakes, but that they literally cannot see the suffering on the ground.
That is the core of his critique. He argues the budget is blind to the real crises. While the finance minister celebrates the 12.2 lakh crore for bridges, the opposition asks a simple, devastating question: where are the jobs?
The jobless growth argument. We hear this a lot, but how does it play out in the 2026 debates?
It's central to everything they say. They argue that GDP numbers are just lines on a graph that don't put food on the table. They claim that despite this massive infrastructure boom, youth unemployment is at crisis levels. They point to falling household savings, which is a really bad sign. It means people are dipping into their reserves just to survive. They even claim that foreign investors are actually pulling capital out of the Indian markets because consumption is down. People just aren't buying things.
And it's not just an urban issue. There's the perennial problem of farm distress. And this gets us into some very murky, very high-stakes political allegations. There's a mention in our sources, specifically from the Pioneer, about a huge controversy regarding a trade deal with the U.S.
Yes, this was a flashpoint in the House. Rahul Gandhi made an incredibly explosive allegation. He stood up and claimed that Prime Minister Modi was compromised.
Compromise. That is a heavy, heavy charge to level against a prime minister on the floor of Parliament. What was the basis?
The allegation centers on a new trade deal with the U.S. Gandhi claimed that the PM was pressurized into signing a deal that opens up Indian markets to American agricultural products, which the opposition says will absolutely crush Indian farmers. But the why is what makes it so explosive. He didn't just say it was a bad deal, he linked this alleged pressure to the Epstein files and to ongoing legal cases against the Adani Group in the U.S.
Whoa, hang on. He's connecting a trade deal to the Adani Group, to the Epstein files. That sounds like a conspiracy thriller, not a parliamentary debate.
It's a very complex web he's weaving. The strategy, from what you can see, is to attack the Prime Minister's personal integrity and his image of strength. By suggesting that the PM is being blackmailed or somehow controlled by corporate interests and foreign leverage, Gandhi is trying to dismantle that strongman image. He's saying, he isn't fighting for you, he is fighting to save his corporate friends.
It's a direct assault on the whole Atmanirbharta narrative, isn't it? The government says self-reliance, and the opposition is screaming corporate servitude. But let's go back to the infrastructure for a second. The government says they are building at record speed. Does the opposition deny that the roads are being built?
They don't deny the construction exists, no. They attacked the quality and the corruption that they allege is behind it. This is the infrastructure collapse counter-narrative. And they have had, unfortunately, a lot of ammunition recently.
Right, the headlines have been pretty brutal. Roof collapses at airports in major cities.
Yes. The roof collapse at Delhi Airport, the capital city's main gateway, that was a PR disaster of the highest order. Then there was Jabalpur and the canopy at Rajkot Airport. The opposition lists these out in the debates like a roll call of shame. They also, very pointedly, mention leaks in the newly constructed Ram Mandir.
That has to hurt. I mean, the Ram Mandir is the crown jewel of the BJP's ideological project, if that's leaking.
It's symbolically devastating. And then you have bridges collapsing in Bihar, almost like a regular occurrence. The opposition's argument is simple. You are obsessed with speed and world records and ribbon cuttings, so you are compromising on quality and safety. They frame it as a massive wastage of taxpayer money. The narrative they're pushing is pay bribes, get contracts, use cheap materials, watch it collapse. They are trying to puncture that world-class balloon. They're asking, if you can't keep the rain out of the airport, how are you going to send chips to the world?
It effectively weaponizes the government's own strength against them. But there is one issue that seems to cut deeper than the roads or even the economy. It's personal.
Right.
It affects every single family that has a teenager dreaming of a better life. The exams.
This is the emotional anchor of the opposition's entire attack, the crisis of faith in the examination system. We're talking about NEET for medical school and NET for teaching positions.
I think for listeners outside India, or even those who haven't been students for a while, we really need to explain the scale of this. This isn't just like taking the SATs.
No, it's not. It is life or death for many families' aspirations. The opposition cites a staggering statistic. 70 paper leaks in the last 7 years. 70. They claim this has affected over 2 crore students.
2 crore. That's 20 million students. That's the entire population of a medium-sized European country.
Exactly. Take the NEET U controversy alone. That one exam affected 24 lakh aspirants. Now picture the life of one of those students. They're 17 or 18 years old. They probably come from a middle class or lower middle class family. They study for 14, 15 hours a day. Their parents might have sold a plot of land or taken a loan to pay for a coaching center in a city like Kota. Their entire family's future is riding on this one exam. They put their whole life on hold for 2 years.
And the promise of democracy is, if you work hard, if you're smart, you get the seat. The system is supposed to be fair.
And then, the day before the exam, the paper leaks. It gets sold on the dark web or via telegram to someone whose parents are rich and can pay lakhs for the answers. The entire concept of meritocracy just dissolves in an instant. The opposition argues this breaks the fundamental contract between the citizen and the state.
It creates a class war right here in the classroom. The rich can buy the degree, the poor can only work hard, and then Their hard work is rendered completely meaningless.
That is exactly how the opposition frames it, and you can hear the anguish in the debates. You have MPs quoting students who are suicidal, who feel completely betrayed, and this is where regional politics also comes roaring in. Tamil Nadu has been incredibly vocal. They are demanding to be exempted from NEET entirely.
Why is Tamil Nadu so specifically opposed to it? What's their argument?
They view NEET as inherently discriminatory. Their argument is that a standardized national test favors students who can afford expensive private coaching, who are usually urban, wealthy kids. They believe it disadvantages rural students who rely on the state board education system. So for them, it's an issue of social justice. They see it as a violation of their state's rights and an attack on the poor. They want admissions to be based on 12th grade marks, not a centralized test that can be so easily leaked or gamed.
So the government is in a really tough spot here. They can't just ignore 24 lakh angry students and their voting parents. What's their defense?
They do acknowledge the leaks. I mean, they have to. Even the president mentioned it in her address to Parliament, which shows you how big the issue is. But their defense is, well, it's a classic case of deflection. First, they blame solver gangs and these vast criminal networks, and politically, they try to turn the mirror back on the opposition. They constantly cite paper leaks that happened in Rajasthan and Chhattisgarh when the Congress was in power there.
The classic "you did it too" defense. What aboutism?
Right. They argue this is a national societal problem, not a BJP problem. And then they point to a new, stricter law against paper leaks as the ultimate solution. But the opposition says that's just a Band-Aid. They say the rot is in the system itself. The National Testing Agency, the NTA, they want the NTA scrapped entirely. They claim the government is in complete denial about the scale of what they call the scam.
So we have the economy capex versus joblessness. We have infrastructure gleaming bridges versus collapsing roofs. We have education, the promise of a digital university versus the reality of paper leaks. But underneath all of these policy fights, there's something even more intense brewing. It's an ideological war. And it got really weird really fast with this whole Shakti controversy.
This is where the debate moves from policy to, well, almost to theology. It becomes a battle over symbols.
Shakti. In Hinduism, this is a profound, powerful concept. It means power energy, usually associated with the divine feminine, the goddess. How on earth did this become a political football thought?
It all started with a metaphor. Rahul Gandhi, in a rally, said something like, "There is a word Shakti in Hinduism. We are fighting against a Shakti." Now, context is everything here. From his perspective, he was referring to the state apparatus, the power of the institutions he claims are captured. You know, the ED, the CBI, the Election Commission, the media. He was trying to say the fight isn't against Modi the person, but the Shakti, or power structure behind him.
Okay, so he was using Shakti to mean the system or the establishment, sort of secular interpretation of power.
Yes. But prior to Mr. Modi, he is an absolute master of political Aikido. He saw an opening and he just took it. He immediately twisted the narrative. He interpreted Shakti strictly and only in the religious sense. He went to rallies and said, "For me, every mother and daughter in India is a form of Shakti. I worship Bharat Mata as Shakti." And then he dropped the hammer. He accused the entire opposition of wanting to destroy Hindu Shakti.
Wow. That is a massive pivot. He turned a critique of political power into an attack on the goddess herself.
And it put the Congress on the defensive immediately. They had to scramble. They tried to reframe it as a fight between Asuri Shakti, which is demonic power, and Daivik Shakti, which is divine power. They tried to say, no, you are the demon, we are the righteous ones.
But the damage was already done.
In terms of messaging, yes. And it got even messier. The BJP dug up an old video of Rahul Gandhi with a pastor, George Panaya. In the video, the pastor is heard saying something to the effect of, "Jesus is the real God. Not like Shakti."
Oof. That is politically radioactive in India.
Yeah.
You couldn't script a more damaging soundbite.
The BJP played that on loop. They used it to brand Rahul Gandhi as anti-Hindu. They even started labeling him a Ramdrohi.
Ramdrohi, traitor to Ram. Given the recent consecration of the Ram Mandir, that label carries the weight of, excommunication from public life.
It frames the political opposition not just as rivals, but as enemies of the civilization itself, which ironically feeds directly into the opposition's core counter-narrative, the undeclared emergency.
This is the argument that the government is ruling through fear, not consent.
Yes. The opposition says the government relies on two main weapons, fear and confusion. They use religion, like with the Shakti issue, to create confusion. And they use the state agencies, like the ED, to create fear.
We have to talk about the agencies, the Enforcement Directorate. The numbers being thrown around are pretty stark.
The claim from the opposition is that 95% of the cases filed by the ED are against opposition leaders. 95%. Yet the conviction rate, the number of people actually found guilty in a court of law, is barely 2% to 3%.
So the opposition argues that the process is the punishment. You get arrested, you get put in jail without bail under these harsh laws, your reputation is destroyed in the media, and then 5 years later the case falls apart. But by then, the election is long over.
Exactly. They call them political hit squads. But here is where the 2024 election result really changed the equation. The fear isn't what it used to be.
Because the BJP lost its absolute majority on its own.
Correct. The Trinamool Congress and other opposition parties openly mock the prime minister in the Lok Sabha now. You just wouldn't have seen that kind of direct confrontation 3 years ago. There's this jibe that he's walking on two crutches.
The crutches, referring to his key coalition allies, Chandrababu Naidu of the TDP and Nitish Kumar of the JDU.
It implies weakness. It implies he can't stand on his own 2 feet anymore. They are signaling constantly that the aura of invincibility is gone.
This brings us to the man who has been at the center of this entire storm, Rahul Gandhi. February 2026 marks roughly 1 year of him being the official leader of opposition. For 10 years, that seat was technically empty because no single party had enough seats to claim it. Now he's there. So how's his report card looking?
Well, it depends entirely on who is grading it. If you ask the BJP, he gets a solid F, maybe an F-.
No surprise there.
Yeah.
But what are the specific complaints? Is it just the usual political rhetoric?
They have a few key attack lines. They called him the leader of demolition. Their argument is that he isn't constructive. He just wants to tear things down without offering an alternative. They point to his party's failures in state elections, blaming his leadership for, say, alliance failures in Bihar. But the biggest stick they beat him with is absenteeism.
The foreign trips. That's been a recurring theme.
Yes. The BJP alleges that the moment the parliament session ends, sometimes even before he flies abroad, they say he's not present for critical debates. They quote leaders saying his performance is very low and that he fails his constitutional duties. They work very hard to paint him as a part-time politician, someone who treats politics as a hobby, not a serious duty.
Part-time politician. That has been a very sticky label for him for a long, long time.
Yeah.
What about from the Congress side? How do they see his year as low-P?
They see it as a moral victory. For them, the 2024 election result, where they stopped the BJP from getting a simple majority, was a complete vindication of his Save the Constitution campaign. They believe he has successfully changed the entire tone of the parliament.
Change the tone how?
By simply being there and shouting back. They argue that by standing up in the Lok Sabha day after day, holding up that red book of the Constitution, he has given voice to the dissent that was effectively silenced for 10 years. They feel they have punctured the balloon of fear. They argue that the government is forced to listen now, forced to engage, even if they don't want to.
So on one side, you have this image of a truant schoolboy who just hates his country's progress. And on the other, you have the image of a dragon slayer who is single-handedly saving democracy.
And as always, the truth is likely found in the friction between those two very different images. But it is undeniable that the dynamic in the House has changed. It is a real parliament again. There is actual debate. There is pushback. The shouting matches we mentioned at the very start, they're happening because the opposition feels they finally have the numbers and maybe the moral authority to shout back.
So let's try to zoom out. We've gone through the trillions of rupees in CapEx, the collapsing airport roofs, the heartbroken students, the Shakti wars, and the political report cards. What does this all mean for the listener who's just trying to make sense of India in 2026?
I think it means we're living in a moment of extreme cognitive dissonance. If you look at the government's data, you see a rocket ship taking off, digital India, 5th largest economy aiming for 3rd, bullet trains, semiconductor plants. It's a very seductive vision. It says, trust us, we are building the future. And parts of that future are physically visible. You can see them.
But then if you look at the opposition's data and the news reports from the ground, you see the nuts and bolts falling off that rocket as it tries to launch. You see paper leaks, you see unemployment, you see social unrest, and you see a pervasive feeling that the system is rigged against the little guy.
Precisely. And for you, the listener, the takeaway isn't to try and choose one side and ignore the other. It's to realize that both these realities are true at the same time. The ARA's 12.2 lakh crore is real money being spent. The Chena Bridge is standing there looking magnificent. But the canceled exams are also real. The frustration of the youth is real. The anger is real.
The friction is the story. It's not about, is India rising or is India falling? It's about the massive stress test of trying to reconcile these two opposing forces within one nation.
And that leads to a final provocative thought to end on. The government's entire vision, this Viksit Bharat 2047, it relies completely on one thing: the demographic dividend, the youth.
Right. You can't have a developed nation without a developed workforce. You can build all the hardware you want, but you need the software, the people to run it.
Exactly. But if that youth, the very foundation of your 2047 dream, is trapped in a cycle of paper leaks, if they're facing jobless growth, if they feel the system is fundamentally rigged against them, can the bridge to 2047 actually be built? Or will it, like those structures criticized by the opposition, collapse under its own weight because the foundation, the trust of the people, was ignored?
That is the question to chew on.
Yeah.
Can you build a superpower on a foundation of frustrated youth? The government spreadsheets say yes, but the streets might be saying no.
Time and perhaps the next election will tell.
That's all for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the clash of two Indias. We will see you next time.